So in this video, we need to talk through a very important concept, note-taking versus note-making. Now, note-taking is the traditional way that you have probably managed your notes and ideas. So let's just break down the differences between these two approaches real quick. Okay, so first with note-taking, you're capturing things to an archive. These things that you capture are generally static or unchanging. You can go find them from the top down. You can search for these things, and search tools have gotten so good that it's to the point where you can pretty much find whatever you're looking for, regardless of if you have any idea where you put it. But these types of notes have limited future value because of that top-down approach. You have to have the thought, then you can go find the thing. So if you're gonna go dig something up, you pretty much know exactly what you're looking for. The kind of serendipitous moments of collision and connection really aren't gonna benefit you a whole lot. And that doesn't mean that you don't have these type of notes in your PKM system, but it does mean, in my opinion, that Obsidian should not be your archive. If you want some place where you can just put things in cold storage and then go look for them when you need them, Obsidian is not the app for that. There are apps that are perfect for this filing cabinet approach though. Okay, so this is what I mean when I'm talking about the top-down filing cabinet approach. You've got all these different folders. Inside all of those folders are individual subfolders. And if you're looking for something in one of those subfolders, you can drill down into the folder and then the subfolder that has that thing that you're looking for. So I actually use DevonThink for this type of cold storage, because if I want to go search for something, that's a great place to hold all those things until I need it. The search tools are so good. There's built-in OCR, so I can find whatever I'm looking for very quickly, very easily. But I'm really not counting on the contents of those things that I've captured there to give me any sort of value when it comes to productivity or creativity in my day-to-day workflows. There's a different type of note though that is really ideal for this alternate approach of note making, and that is actually what I would store inside of Obsidian. So these, with note making, you're basically discovering your notes as you browse through them, and your notes are going to change and evolve over time, which means that they're not the same. And you want these to kind of appear at the right moment in the right situation from the bottom up. You want these to kind of be organically displayed. So backlinks are one of the ways that you can surface these things, and it's really, really valuable. But I believe that these notes actually have infinite future value, as opposed to the notes that you stick in an archive where you know exactly what that thing is and it's never gonna change, and this is exactly what it's going to be 6 months, 6 years when you later when you dig this up. These notes that are living and breathing and you're constantly developing these ideas, you really have no idea what these are going to turn into. And one of the ways that you kind of get some additional value added to these notes is you look at the connections. You discover the connections between this note and some other notes. And this is where the graph view comes in. You know, when you're talking about note making, there is no hierarchy. There are no folders. Anything can be connected to anything. And this is where a lot of the inspiration comes from. Now, this is the graph view, the big graph view inside of Obsidian. I'm actually not a big fan of this big graph view. I do like the local graph a lot though, and I'll explain that when I get into some of those workflows. But this is really important. When you have these connections that go beyond the hierarchical structure, that is, in my opinion, the best version of what is already happening in your brain as you are connecting and developing these ideas. I believe that creativity is a formula. Then you don't need to judge the output. You just, if you want better output, what you need to do is you need to get better inputs. And this is exactly what I did. You know, at one point I actually said, I guess I'm just not creative. And I didn't think that I had the creative gene. I saw other people who were making things and I thought, you know, they're able to pull something out of thin air. They get this flash of inspiration and the song or the article or the book, whatever, just drops like fully formed. Sounds ridiculous now that I say that out loud, but that's what I actually thought. And then I read Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. And this is the point where I started to realize that all of these things connect. Austin kind of talked about how when you are creating something, nothing is new. You're stealing this inspiration from other places. You're connecting things in new and interesting ways. And in fact, he said that when you create something new, all you're doing is connecting the dots in new and interesting ways that haven't been done before. But the dots themselves are not original. And that's important. So now it's not on me to come up with something completely original. I just need to consider my inputs. Remember, creativity is a system. And if we go back to the previous video where we talked about the different types of information, we want to make sure that we're collecting, that we're consuming quality information, because if we want good output, we've got to have good input. We have to pay attention to the kinds of dots that we're collecting. And for me, I realized that I was starting to write. I was writing about productivity and creativity online. And at one point, I was in charge of a podcast where it was a productivity show, and I was working with Asian Efficiency. And I helped launch that show. Eventually, I took over as the host. So I was planning all the content. I was interviewing everybody. It was a lot of work just for the podcast, but then I was also writing articles, usually about once every other week. And then I had there was a community where I would actually create a new video course every single month on a topic like journaling or focus or whatever. And that was kind of the seeds of a lot of this PKM stuff for me. I realized over time that productivity stuff is only useful when it's serving a specific purpose. Otherwise, what ends up happening is we just kind of employ those tactics, we get more efficient, and our reward for getting more efficient is we have more work to do. But the takeaway from this story is that when I was trying to create so regularly, I thought I had this hypothesis basically that if I read books consistently, I'd never run out of ideas. And that's exactly what happened. That doesn't mean I'm just ripping off stuff from those books, but I'm getting the dots and I'm connecting them in new and interesting ways. And I noticed that every single book that I read, I was able to kind of fill in some gaps from previous books that I had read. And my brain was connecting these dots. And then when I sat down to actually write the scripts and create the videos, record the podcast, whatever the output was, it was easy for me to do that. And it always came out with a little bit of my own personal spin on it. And so that was kind of what I was trying to consistently do. Now, when you're talking about the inputs, there are 3 questions that I think are worth asking, and these come from Jim Rohn. The first question is, who am I allowing to speak into my life? And I believe that if you're taking courses like this, you're listening to podcasts, you're reading books, those are, in a way, people that you've given a platform to speak into your life. So you need to understand who you're allowing to speak into your life. You need to understand what effect that is having on you, because nothing is neutral. And then ultimately, you have the power to silence some of these voices if you don't want to hear from them anymore. So asking the third question here, is that okay? When you start taking ownership over the platform that you give other people in your life, doesn't mean that you're necessarily removing certain people from your life, but you're just not giving them the platform anymore. I used to work with a family business. That was really, really difficult sometimes because it was hard to separate the work from the relationship of working with my brother, my mom, my dad. And it just got to be too much for me because we couldn't have these conversations about business topics without people getting offended. And so, they want the best for me, and they were the loudest voices in my life for a very long time. And it's not that I, never see them anymore. In fact, one of the reasons I left the family business is because I wanted to preserve the relationships, and I have a great relationship with my parents now. I see my dad almost every week for coffee. That never would have happened, though, if I would have continued to value his input on specifically what I should be doing with my life. So there are lots of voices like that where you have to decide for yourself, what is the impact that these voices are having on me? Is it keeping my world small? Is it enlarging my vision? Those types of things. And then deciding for yourself which ones you're actually going to listen to. Now, keep in mind that as it pertains to this level of the PKM stack here, we're talking about really creativity, the dots we're collecting, the voices that we're allowing to speak into our life, that everything is a remix. So all of the information that you're collecting, all the dots that you have in your possession to make something new with, yes, none of them are completely original, and that is completely okay. That does not diminish your creativity in any way, shape, or form. I remember being at the MaxStock conference, and there was somebody who was a professional musician, and they were demoing how to create music in Logic using these different loops. And it kind of struck me, you would never think that a DJ or a musician who is using loops like that they're not creative. That it's a different type of creativity. Putting those things together in new and interesting ways, that is a form of creativity. What about a writer who uses a template? That's creativity. If you're talking about fiction writing, there are only so many formats for stories. I think there's like 7 or 8 of them throughout history. So you can't just say, well, because this follows this format, this is not a good story. So use these things, these pre-existing things that can help you make the act of creativity just a little bit easier. Another concept to keep in mind here is the map is not the territory. I love this. This is a mental model I picked up from reading The Great Mental Models, Volume 1 by Shane Parrish. And that he's not the one who came up with this mental model, but that's where I first came across it. Because the map is not the territory, basically what this means is that anytime you look at a map, you're looking at a representation of the territory. And what's on that map are the things that the map maker has decided is important for you to know. So if you're looking at, driving directions, this is pretty straightforward. We need to know the street names, we need to know the major landmarks, we need to know where to turn, things like that. So we can all kind of agree what should be on that map. But when you're talking about your own mental map, your way of making sense of the world, you could put whatever you want on there. And really, we need to embrace the role of the cartographer. We need to decide for ourselves what is worth adding to that map. We can't possibly put everything on there. If you had a map that contained all the information as the territory represented, it would be as big as the territory. It'd be completely useless as a map. But a lot of times we just take the maps that people give us and we don't think about what we would actually put on there. And so I want you to keep this in mind as you're going through and building your PKM system. The map is not the territory, and to embrace the role of the cartographer in your own life and answer the question, what does this mean to me? Now, sometimes it can be tricky. Sometimes we don't know what something means to us. And that's kind of like a mental squeeze point. That's the point where we actually want to open up a note, call it an opinion note, call it a map of content, whatever. It's basically, you're just going to codify your thoughts on something by writing it out. Every single time you feel that pressure of, I don't really know what I think about something, just start typing out what you think about it. And you'll be amazed as you start to type that it kind of crystallizes your thoughts on a topic, and it helps you make better maps that are more useful for you in your personal knowledge management system going forward.